Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. It is Thursday, the 8th of June in 2023, if you can believe that. And still no jetpacks. Every day I just sit there and look out the window waiting for the Amazon truck. I almost said UPS truck, but I mean, it's 2023. Just, you know, I put in an order for one back in, when was that? 66 or 67, I think. So it's definitely overdue. Um, anyway, here we are. So, hey, speaking of jetpacks and things, before we get to the questions, we're going to try and get to the questions earlier tonight. Of course, that's what I always say. But on the 12th, which is Monday, it's a few days from now as we record this, I'm going to be doing my epic moon landing defense thing for Fox Business. And I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't forgotten anything. So for those of you who either believe the moon landing happened or those that don't believe the moon landing happened, if you do believe the moon landing happened, that'd be most of you, I hope. I just want to see if I've missed anything. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll just take a few moments, not what you believe, but just to point out what you've heard in terms of why. What I don't want to come up. I don't want to be blindsided by them having an argument that I'm not ready to go. So what have you heard? I've heard the Van Allen belts. I think I got that one pretty much nailed. Stars in the Sky. I've got that one nailed. And I just want to see what else we got. So the lines aren't parallel. You know, the shadows aren't parallel. That one's easy as well. But other than that, anybody got any other ones? Oh, it's quiet in here. Although there is always that delay. Flag shadow is wrong. Okay. So the flag shadow, and the flag shadow is a shadow problem, but the flag moving is just so easily done. The plus of the photo that goes behind the astronauts in the photo, I don't know what that means. Couldn't have been done without computers. I got that one nailed. Reflection in a space plate. I've never heard that. They'll find one of 15 points to stump you, claim victory, and then have amnesia when the next person refutes that point, gets stumped by a different one. I'll tell you one thing. The plus lines in the photo, the line goes behind the astronaut. Oh, you mean the little registration lines? Yeah. Okay, well, first of all, I want to see the original picture. But one cross line in one picture could be explained by many things, including being overexposed. So I should be ready for that. That's why I'm asking. The grifter started the moon landing conspiracy, and the enemies of American exceptionalism took note. Yes, that's a great point. Let's see. I don't. Somebody mentioned the lander footage taking off from the moon. What's wrong with that? The reflection of the faceplate is a new one. Claim apparently that they see the reflection of a camera crew. Do they? Okay. So I think I need to go to the original. Let me just. This is exactly what I wanted actually. So thanks for this. I didn't want to be, well, I don't know much about that. I just want to have them all shot down. By the way, and this is really, really important when you're dealing with this kind of thing. I'm going to just say, now that we've dealt with all of these issues, you have to tell me your theory. You don't get to just keep shooting at things without providing an explanation. So you tell me what you think happened. That's where you really have to start. Right? Well, the whole thing was faked. Yeah, I got that part. Okay, definitely. So it was faked? Yes. Was it shot on Earth? Yes. Where? Now you start getting contradictions. This is the other thing I found about conspiracy theories, especially with the JFK thing. The people who think that there was a conspiracy to assassinate JFK all agree that there was a conspiracy to assassinate JFK, but none of them can agree on who the conspirators were. That's important, because that's telling me that there is no theory behind the theory, right? How many people you talked about 9/11 being an inside job? It's like, well, all I know is the people that watched it happen. We all have the same story, and all of us have the same story. We can tell you the same thing. All of you guys start diverging the second that we start talking about this thing. Let's see what we got. Kubrick said it was fake. Well, first of all, show me the quote. Show me where it appears. Secondly, one guy saying it's fake doesn't I'm going to destroy the entire one guy said, that guy said. I'm ready for that. So let me see, reflections in the faceplate of the camera crew. I guess they forgot that. You know what's interesting about that, however? What's interesting about that is there are no reflections of a camera crew in the faceplate. I never thought about that before. Every one of those shots is a giant fisheye traffic mirror. There should be lights and camera crew in every single frame coming off of the gold faceplate. Why didn't that occur to me before? The video is moving in real time. Looking at the camera, you can see why did that not occur to me? My God. That I am very glad, very grateful for everybody. That is amazing. Phosphorus says Building 7, World Trade Center still has no answer, other than the fact that the two tallest buildings in the world basically fell through it, and it burned for several hours. You're right, there's no possible explanation for that. Actual movies don't show cameras in mirrors. Actual movies don't show cameras in mirrors because you're dealing with a guy looking at the bathroom mirror while he's shaving, which you can shoot off angle. We're talking about essentially a 180-degree panorama constantly in motion. It's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. You couldn't shoot without digital effects. You couldn't shoot a movie that had a camera in it if you had a round mirror without seeing the crew. It's impossible. So let's see. I agree with Max Models on this. That's what Gerald Posner in his book Case Closed, which for me was Case Closed, he said basically it's unacceptable that some loser with a $20 rifle could kill this dynamic, charismatic president. They have to add emotional weight to the side of Oswald's scale. I'm not going to get into that now. Let's see. The moon is not solid. I think I can probably deal with that one. Is there anything else? I can't believe that I did not think of that before. Claimed the engines weren't reliable. Who claimed that the engines aren't reliable? Because I watched him fly, and so did most of the planet. So who claimed that the engines weren't reliable? Where's your proof? A guy said that they flew there on unicorns, or didn't. That doesn't mean anything. A guy saying anything, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who he is. I've got that whole thing with the Eagles won the Super Bowl thing. Yeah, one guy saying we never went to the moon. I really should probably take a look at that. Dave Big Booty said William Casing, who wrote "We Never Went to the Moon." I should probably grab that real quick and just kind of go over it, because why don't we have 2023 HD footage of rovers on the moon right now? It turns out we do. We do have those pictures. There's too small to resolve with the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, but once this nonsense started getting serious, they altered its what would perihelion, what would that be? Periapsis. And they got closer. They got about half the distance. And then they could resolve the legs on the lander, and all the science experiments are there, and the rovers are there, and their footprints are there, and the tracks are there. and the laser reflectors are there. So there you go. Who filmed the lander taking off? I hope I get that, really. I really, 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 really hope I get that. I think that's going to be my favorite. So, who filmed the lander taking off? Well, those of you that were paying attention may have noticed that there was no footage of the takeoff of Apollo 11 or 12 or 14. There's no footage of that because it didn't exist. Footage of the lander, of the top of the LEM actually coming off, only started with Apollo 15. And that only started with Apollo 15 because that's the first time we had a rover on the moon with a good camera on it. And the part I like most about this question is I remember hearing about how this was being done, and I remember hearing on the news that the scientists on NASA had to command the tilt up a second or two earlier than the actual launch because of the time it would take for that radio signal to get to the moon. That's just, how does it happen? Does anybody? I'm sure I have to look this up too. But I am like, sometimes I say things where I'm like so sure I'm right, and there's like, are you positive? And I'm virtually positive that on the 15, 16, and 17 missions, surely the guys on the ground are panning the camera. I just have to confirm that. I want to be loaded for bear on this. Yes, surely, because when they're driving across the moon, there's somebody, they're just kind of, somebody's cranking that thing around. Let's see. J.B. Coulter said, who drew Walter Cronkite's animations? Stanley Kubrick. You hand drew him, actually. Moon landing conspiracy theorists say this photo is new hoax proof. Okay, let me see here. I just got to check this out. This would be probably... Okay. Hang on. I'm reading this. I'm watching this article. And they're claiming that I'm looking at the picture, and they're claiming that there's a mysterious man standing in the reflection of this guy's helmet. And you know what's really weird about it is that camera grip or whatever he is also wearing an Apollo moon suit, and he's the only one in the picture. That must have been what happened. That's probably where the whole thing got out of the bag. They caught a picture of a reflection of a movie grip alone in an Apollo 11 suit, Apollo moon suit, in a fishbowl reflection, and there's your proof. Okay, hang on. We appear to have here is a figure of a human not wearing a spacesuit. All right, here we go. Still, the uploader didn't convince many commenters who thought there was a simpler explanation. Of course it looks like an astronaut to you. See, this is what these guys will do. They do this with the Mars thing. They'll take a picture of anything. And everybody who's commenting says, that's the other astronaut. Okay, good. If that's, see, this is kind of actually what I just, whenever I go into this kind of combat, I do this when I'm doing like a debate or something, and I don't do many of those. But when I do, I don't want to be blindsided by a question that I can't answer. And when I do this, when I prep for these kind of things and I hear the other side's arguments, I actually sit back and realize it's going to be much easier than I thought it would be, This is it. This is what they've got. But this business of zooming in on things, I'll tell you the most amazing true story about this as it's just an incredibly telling experience. What were they called? Oh, okay. So this guy is, I've mentioned this a few times before. Back when I was working as an editor, I was working on the same show as a guy who was like one of the apparently UFO hoax guys, right? Easily used against you just about anything involving eyewitnesses, election fraud, for instance. I don't care. It's not the point. You cannot. You can get a witness to say anything. You can get 30 witnesses to say anything for any number of reasons. If some crazy old guy says, well, we didn't go, and I'm a NASA engineer, well, then he's either lying or he forgot. And that's it. Those are the choices. Because his opinion doesn't outweigh a 365-foot tall rocket and 7 million people watching the thing take off 12 times. It doesn't outweigh it. A guy said this. Well, okay. Well, wow. A guy said that, huh? How about that? Well, you know what? Actually, I thought about this argument. Any variation on there's a guy in NASA who said that it certainly didn't happen. He was an inside guy at Rocketdyne. I said, I'll tell you what's interesting about that argument. About 400,000 people worked on the Apollo program. And 399,995 of them say that it did happen. So if you're telling me that one guy deep inside of NASA said it didn't happen, I can show you hundreds of thousands of guys deep inside NASA who did say it happened. So if all I was doing was comparing one guy said this and another guy said that, then there's no right. You can't prove anything that way. So it's just silly. Anyway, so back to the UFO thing. So this guy was a big UFO. I guess he was like a UFO expert. He was one of these guys. Webb was just getting started, and he. Thank you for that, Dave Olson. The inside guy at Rocketdyne was William Casing, and he worked in the PR department. Isn't that interesting? Thank you for that. Carl Sagan pointed that out. He was talking about this ancient astronaut thing. Well, thank you very much. That's going to be very useful. He's talking about this ancient astronauts thing. The idea that the Earth was visited by, advanced extraterrestrials. I'm starting to become convinced, based on some pretty decent evidence, that there may have been an advanced Bronze or Middle Age civilization 5,000 years earlier than we thought, but that's a possibility. That's not out of the picture. I just have to read the traditionalist view of it. It's the same thing with the Shakespeare thing. Anyway, so this guy was the guy, and a bunch of people said, you guys should have like a debate or something. So it was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 people at this guy's apartment. And I said, okay, what you got? And he starts trotting out this evidence. And I could tell you how weak all of this stuff was. But I mean, it was like, well, that's obviously a bent paperclip that's lying underground. That's not the umbilical cord to the shuttle it's towing some kind of magnetic device, because it's as thick as the shuttle is. That kind of thing, right? So then he showed me something about a newly discovered form of alien life that's visiting the Earth, and he called them rods. And I said, all right, let me see the rods. And he's taken a digital camera and he's slowed it down, and you can see these creatures flying through the air. And they're long, stretched out rods. They have little things on both sides. And it's like, boom, 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 boom. You can see these things like, holy cow, how big are they and stuff. And he's making such a big deal out of this. I said, how do you explain this stuff? And I said, can I see it in real time, please? Well, I mean, how do you? I would just like to see it in real time. And when you play it in real time, it's a couple of bugs flying in front of the lens, and there's no question about it, right? None. Monk in Training says they seem to have you over the moon, Bill Semper Fi. I just want to get it right. Okay, thank you, GK. So Yeah, I just want to be loaded for bear on this, and I feel like I am pretty prepared. I don't want to get not so much blindsided as just wrong-footed, you know. But yeah, I keep waiting for some killer argument I haven't heard, and I haven't heard it because it doesn't exist. So I guess that's about it for this. Why don't we just see if we can catch up on the questions here? One to a customer, by the way. I should have mentioned that last time. Unless we were sitting there with extra time on our hands, I think one to a customer per week is probably a pretty good limit if we're going to try and get through these things. So let's see what we got here. Nope, I don't want that. Sorry. Come on now. Here we go. First, we must log in. Members. Forum. Stratosphere Lounge questions and more. That's always my favorite part of that. I just love the and more. And thanks again to Henry and GK and Marusha and everybody else who's been curating this thing. Okay. So here's a 4-paragraph question. And I'd actually like, if we're going to do questions, for them to be questions. It's not just this one person. It's just this. Sometimes it's a whole page. What's the actual question? This one comes from, surprisingly enough, Eric Blake. Live long, peace and long life, image of Bill Whittle. Yeah, live long and prosper, Eric. Now that my brilliantly impassioned monologue, to quote Rush, MHRIP is out of the way, let's discuss the electability question. And I assure you, Bill, this wasn't talked about last time. Bear with me. Still haven't got the question. As you probably noticed, most likely to win is a major talking point from the DeSantis 24 crowd, particularly Ben, who, quite frankly, is emotional about it. Now, this is a guaranteed trope. Come election season, the conservative Republican experts go, remember the Buckley rule, pick the most conservative candidate who can win. Thing is, last time the GOP electorate listened to that siren song, who did we get? Romney. Time before that, McCain. In 2016, the electable candidates were Jeb Bush and Scott Walker. The base ignored it, and we won. So here's a bright idea. If we're going to blather on about electability, how about we go to the analysts that have actually got a successful track record on the subject, namely the Vegas betting pools. What do they say about a Trump versus Biden matchup and a DeSantis versus Biden matchup? That last paragraph would have done it. I don't know. I haven't seen the odds. I watched them very closely for the 2022 midterms, and we had a sizable lead. I think we had it the night of the election. That's the first time I've ever seen that thing. It wasn't a sizable lead. I remember it was the Senate was very likely, and for a while, a couple weeks earlier, the House was getting to be 80% likely too in the betting, and then the House went down. It might have dipped below 50. Come to think of it, the Senate was still 70-80% chance of Republicans taking over the Senate, and I guess they just didn't account for, I don't know, a lot of things. Maricopa County would be high on my list of things that they didn't account for, but in any event. Okay, let's see. So I don't have the election betting odds. I can look them up. However, I agree with you. I think they are the most reliable source by a wide margin for 2 reasons. Number one, the sample pool is much bigger. 3 reasons. Much bigger. Some of these presidential polls are sampling 1,000 likely voters or registered voters or whatever voters you want so that you get the outcome you want in the poll. So the sampling base is much, much higher. That's important. The second thing about it is it's people opting in. In other words, it's not like if somebody calls you and says, do you think Biden's a good president? Some people are going to be compelled to say, well, yeah, I guess he's okay, because they don't want to be the person to, ruffle any feathers. They don't know. They don't know anything about where this is going to go. It's why you have a curtain on the back of the voting booth. But if you have people coming in to say, I think Biden's a bad president, going to lose, or Trump for whatever the case may be, so that's I guess that's really about it. Oh, I'm sorry. The other thing, finally, and the most important thing is this isn't a free vote. People are putting their own money on this. That's why the what does an ox weigh worked out so well. Ended up that in order to vote on how much the ox would weigh, and I've talked about it so many times, not going to get into it again, but nevertheless, you couldn't just vote on it. You had to put down the equivalent of about $50 to purchase a ticket to guess the weight of the ox, and the person who got closest was the winner. So that $50 penalty weeded out joke answers. He weighs 3 million pounds. Ha ha ha. Well, you just lost $50. So when in the betting pools, people also have their money on the line, and I think all three of those things tend to make them very, very good. Betting pools say Trump versus DeSantis is 60-25. Presidency's 37% for Biden, 24% for Trump, according to election betting odds. If Biden's at 37% now and Trump's at 24%, I would have thought those numbers would be inverted. You never know, but again, these are not polls that are conducted. That's what I was getting at. These polls are not conducted by politicians for politicians. These are bets on things that just exactly like any other bet on who's going to win the next football game or whatever. Yeah, somebody said Trump got federally indicted today. Just keep it up, keep it up. And it's I'm not going to get into this whole thing again. We covered this many times. This is the only way DeSantis gets the nomination is if Trump withdraws and endorses him, which seems unlikely. I'm very curious about how Trump tends to respond. He goes after everybody, but he saves his most vitriolic responses to the people who attack him the most personally. And the interesting thing I'm going to be watching when this goat rodeo starts up again is how nasty is it going to get between DeSantis and Trump? Because if they keep it just civil mud throwing, mudslinging, just kind of run-of-the-mill average, this guy's a worthless liar and he beats his wife, that kind of thing, those things can be forgiven. And I'm just wondering about DeSantis as a vice presidential candidate. I think that'd be a pretty powerful ticket, but I don't know whether he take it or not. I know Trump won't take vice president. So I think one thing to watch is just simply how nasty is it going to get. And if I'm DeSantis, I'm not going to attack Trump's. I'm not going to attack him personally. I'm just not going to do it. I don't see any win for DeSantis by doing it that way. I would just go, hey, look, if it were me, if I was Ron DeSantis, I would say, hey, Donald Trump saved us from gulags. He just did it. And he made a lot of enemies there and so on. And there are many things he did as president that I thought were good and inspiring, and other things that I think can be improved on. And I think I'm the guy to improve on them. I think that Florida is the case that shows that we can actually govern not only a state but a country well with no income tax, that kind of thing. And just kind of keep Trump out of it. That's what I would do. Because if DeSantis cannot afford to piss off, really, like long-term piss off the real hardcore Trump supporters. So let's see here. Super chat. Got it. Super chat from Cody Fett. Bill, are you prepared for the "you're evil and everything you say is a lie" opening? Having seen that in the recent Dr. Tour versus Mr. Farina debate, I feel compelled to ask that. I'm obviously prepared for some version of it. And by the way, I don't think this is an actual debate. I think that the way this is structured is the host, who is a comedian, is going to be making the arguments, and myself and other people, not at the same time, are there to rebut the arguments. That's my understanding of it. It's supposed to be kind of, kind of a give and take, and sort of, um, you know, little jibes and bon mots and that kind of. Did I say bon mots? Good God. So I do actually have an answer for that. If somebody said you're evil and everything you say is a lie, my response to that would be, well, you're evil and everything you say is a lie. Want to get down to the facts now, or do you want to just keep doing this all day? You're a Nazi and you're this. You know what? You're a Nazi and you're this. And I'm just going to keep mirroring it back. There's a great little beat in Parks and Recreation. I never once watched an episode of Parks and Recreation, but I've watched just about every clip of oh, for the love of God, it was right in my Ron Swanson, and he said he was going to, there was some kind of an inquiry or something with local government officials, and he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer every question with a question. This is not what he said, but it was words to the effect of, do you know anything about this missing money? Why would I know something about this missing money? Well, you're the guy who's in charge of the money. Am I? That kind of thing. It was just grand. It was just brilliantly written. I really loved it. Hey, look at this. Another super chat from Pitsky P. I was not convinced about Trump about 2 months ago, but now I am behind him all the way. Thanks for the stream as always, Bill. You're very welcome, Pitsky. It's going to... Okay, so here's just to wrap this question up in terms of the, yet another forecast, and we still got, a year and a half to go. Good Lord. But Trump is such a polarizing figure. It looks like Trump's going to be the Republican nominee unless something dramatic happens. And then the question will be, will more people come out because they're terrified of a second Biden term, or will more people come out because they're terrified of a second Trump term? That's really what it is. I've heard a number of people say that you don't really go and vote for somebody so much as people come out to vote against somebody. I think there's probably some truth to that. We've got to stop this guy. So we'll see. But I don't know the answer to that. I don't like those numbers, but it's still early. Eric Blake says, I'll say this, Bill, I was a Cruz guy in 2016. Their fight was pretty ugly. When Trump became the nominee, we got over it. Yes, that's exactly what I'm hoping for. Mel Frank says, Trump was federally indicted today. It's over. I feel sick. I don't. I really don't. I just, at this point, these things just like water off the back of a duck for me. And I think virtually all of his supporters feel that way. I can't think of a single Republican, let me rephrase that, I can't think of a conservative who's going to have their vote changed by this kind of thing. Phosphorus says the Senate will likely try to disqualify Trump from running. They can try all they want to. The more they try to knock this guy out of the race, the more fanatical a Trump supporter I become. That's my attitude about this. If you're going to weaponize the government and you're going to weaponize the government against this one guy, then there's something about that guy that's making you bring out all of your guns. And you don't want to show all those guns, but you're showing them anyway, because you don't want people to know just how much power you really have. And if people are that desperate to stop him, then he's doing something right. What happens if they succeed? I don't know how they can look. As far as I understand it, Trump could be in jail and people could vote for him and have him be elected president. So that's my latest understanding of the situation, and it may come to that. And if he is in jail, then I'm not only going to vote for him, I'm going to vote for him many times. Dave Big Booty, if you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. That was Trumpy One Kenobi. FBI docs show that Biden involved in a $5 million bribe for Ukraine. Wow, what a surprise. Precocious curmudgeon, sorry about that. Are you ruling out the dark horse candidate RFK Jr.? I'm ruling him out of the Republican primary. I think the Democrats are practically wetting themselves to find somebody to replace Biden, some way to do it. Tom Bombadil says the good side doesn't always win. No, it often does not win. Absolutely correct. But the good side has to keep fighting anyway. So that's how you determine whether or not you belong on the team. How many kicks to the face can you take and get back up again? It's not a question of getting depressed or sad or cynical or angry. I was angry. I was practically insane for 2 months after the 2020 election. But then, you just get back up and keep fighting them. So that's what we're going to do. And I don't know what they do about Kamala Harris. They can't replace her. I think that's pretty much a given. You can't possibly just replace the first black woman female vice president. Bucka 588 said they would want Newsom. Newsom wants the job. Newsom's very photogenic, but I think Newsom would be very surprised, and I think most of the country would be very surprised if they heard him debating against anybody. I think Trump would just destroy him. Because $800 haircut is just, that's all he is. There's nothing to him. He's just a walking political caricature of the limousine liberal. He is an awful, awful, awful man. And the reason I think that anybody would destroy Newsom in the election is because all you have to do is just crack out the statistics and just show what's happened to California under his governorship, and show what happened to San Francisco under his mayorship. They will elect Kamala as a face, and then the same cabal that is running Bernie right now will rule the world. I don't think the cabal that is ruling the world is running Bernie, because if the cabal that was ruling the world wanted to run Bernie, they would have run Bernie. They would have run him in 16. They would have run him again in 20. Let's not forget Biden was just barely even mentioned in the race, and then all of a sudden here comes South Carolina primary, and next thing you know, he's the nominee. Newsom said he would arrest DeSantis if he came to California to campaign. Man, if I'm Ron DeSantis, I would absolutely 100%. I would 100% make that a publicity. I would 100%. I would find out what it was that whether or not Newsom had any kind of a charge, even if he had a charge, I don't care. If Newsom actually said that, and it sounds like him, if Newsom actually said, if Ron DeSantis comes to California, I'll arrest him. If I'm Ron DeSantis, it's like, Susie, get me the first flight to LAX and notify the press and tell everybody that there's going to be a national level scene at Terminal 4 at 2 o'clock in the baggage claim area, right? I'm sorry. Tom Bombadil says, no, Bill, I meant Weekend with Bernie, not Bernie Sanders. It's hard to tell these old kind of overripe corpses from each other, honestly, just to answer that for you. I would have, if he actually said that, I would have been on the plane that day. So let's see what we got here for the next question. Now, Michael Baker, who doesn't write a lot of questions, I certainly want to take it. But he's proposed a script for a Bud Light ad, and it's basically it's basically the Harry and Paul bit about these two old British guys in a gentleman's club arguing about whether somebody is queer or not, and I just don't think I'm going to read it just because I don't really want to act it out. I think it's clever, and when I started writing, this is all I did. I basically just stole Monty Python things. I just stole it. I just had argument clinic verbatim, word for word. We shot a scene like that because I just thought it was so hilarious that we just I wasn't pretending I wrote it, but I thought it was just so hilarious that the two of us could outdo John Cleese and Michael Palin in terms of the hilarity of the delivery. And it turns out I was wrong about that. So thank you for the question, Michael, and I hope you don't mind me skipping it over. Okay, let's see. We're going with our one per customer rule until we get done here. Hey, here's one from Eli Noor. It's always nice to see relatively new names here. Vivek Ramaswamy, running for GOP nomination, most likely just to earn name recognition, said he would be willing to give up certain Ukrainian territories to Russia if Russia was willing to leave its alliance with China. He stated that the Russia-China alliance is the biggest threat to U.S. foreign policy. While most of us are familiar with your take on the Ukraine war, would you agree with his statement that the Russia-China alliance is our biggest foreign policy issue? He also made statements that he would raise the voting age to 25 and allow 18 to 24-year-olds to vote if they passed a civics exam. Man, I'll tell you what, I'm leaning hard towards Vivek. Those two statements right there, sweet. Some interesting concepts, but not sure how electable he would be. I'm not endorsing this guy. Just curious to get your thoughts on some of his policies. Well, first of all, as much as it pains everybody, Mr. Ramaswamy doesn't get to decide what Ukraine is going to do with Crimea or other territories. That's going to come down to Ukraine and Russia. That's what's going to decide that, and everybody else has just got an opinion, and it's it's an opinion, and it doesn't mean anything. I'm not exactly calling it virtue signaling. I'm just saying it's just hot air. I have an opinion too about the territories, and no one's going to listen to my opinion either. So that's not. I just don't find that to be a serious talking point. Now, the bigger question, obviously, is the Russia-China alliance. Having just finished the Cold War, and the funny thing about the Cold War was there's 13 episodes, and 12 and a half of them went from 1947 to 1972. Virtually everything after that was in the last episode, because all the interesting stuff happened in the first half of the Cold War. So in 1972, Nixon did two things of note, 72 and going into 73, I think. The first thing he did was he decided to bomb North Vietnam in Hanoi for the first time during the war, or at least during everything after the Gulf of Tonkin anyway. He just sent B-52s over the capital and struck industrial targets in the capital, but we all know what non-precision bombing of a capital does. So the communists had been avoiding peace talks because it wasn't in their interest to talk peace. They had Lyndon Johnson and Democrats lined up, and these are the guys who are saying same altitude, same airspeed, same direction, same time of day, same call signs, same everything. Just you don't even have to. The North Vietnamese don't even have to put anti-aircraft guns or fighters. They can just string nets and catch the F-105s coming in. So Nixon decides, okay, well, let's see what we can do if we decide to actually fight as if we were a superpower. That's right. Matt Mitten's got it as a linebacker too. So all of a sudden, to their amazement, and I mean their actual amazement, and I know it was amazement because I've heard stories of how quickly they changed their attitudes on the ground. All of a sudden, North Vietnam is fighting a superpower and not just a regional power, led by brownies, like Girl Scout brownies. All of a sudden, they're facing the They're not facing the full might and fury of the United States. They know that too. But they're starting to get a taste of what it's like to have fleets of B-52s instead of just, a couple of fighters or fighter bombers making a run on a ground target. So after, I want to say 7 or 8 days, they're like suing for peace. So Nixon turned up the pressure, got Hanoi to the peace table, signed a peace agreement. And as that peace, I'm just determined to keep saying this. People sometimes think I'm just reaching for things. Maybe I am. I just think that the people who fought the Vietnam War deserve some credit. When that war officially over, when it ended, we won the war in terms of the objectives of the war. And there's no denying that. The entire war was fought because the communist North Vietnamese invaded the South. And the United States supported South Vietnam in order to drive them back behind the line and keep them in North Vietnam. And when we signed the peace agreement, that was exactly what had happened. They were back behind the line. It was a goddamn mess, and it was all of the things that it was. I'm not trying to say anything about it. Not going to say anything about it. In terms of like, gee, what a swell war. But if you had the conditions during the entire Vietnam War, American Vietnam War, the conditions of victory were put the North back above the North Vietnamese border and have a free South Vietnam. And when we left, when we signed that peace agreement, that's what we had. That's what we had. And Nixon, in this general time period, did a second thing that was absolutely brilliant. He made the Cold War into a triangle instead of a bipolar thing. You would think that China being a communist power and Soviets being a communist power, you would think that they would be just united in brotherly love. That never really happened. When Mao finished his revolution, I want to say 1947, that seems about right. He went to Moscow, and he and Stalin sat in the same limousine and were driving around being shown the sights by staff officers. And they didn't say a word. They did not like each other at all. So China went off and did its own thing. And you would have thought that they would be, comrades. But the fact of the matter is that 49, thank you, Dave. But the fact of the matter is that Russia and China have an extensive border, and that border is as ancient as about anything on this planet. The Rus and the Chinese have been I won't say mortal enemies, but that's always been their primary threat. Russia's always looking towards Europe, but really their real border was always with China. That's where the people could really hurt them in terms of the only thing the Soviets were good at, which is a land army. So Nixon brought China to the table, and Mao realized it was in his advantage to get chummy with America, because that increased his leverage with both America and the Soviets. So what Nixon did was he just unlocked the Cold War. And as I said in the Cold War series, there was an excellent chance. My favorite, and I said this verbatim in episode 13, I think. I said my favorite video clip from the Cold War is one that I discovered within a few days of finishing the series of the Cold War. My favorite video clip of the Cold War is Nixon and Brezhnev signing, I'm pretty sure it was the SALT I agreements. Brezhnev got to be just a stuffed mummy with a mechanical hand. But if you look at that, and you really do need to find it, and I'm sure somebody will put it up in the comment section here. Nixon and Brezhnev sat down for this thing, and they were so euphoric about the idea of easing the pressure. This is Nixon's détente. Easing the pressure and walking back the growth of these weapons, and eventually talking about reducing them and then eventually eliminating them. So Nixon and Brezhnev are there, and they're both shake hands and they're smiling. Then they go to their separate tables, right? And the guys bring out their bound copies of the things to sign, and Brezhnev is about to sign, and he makes a joke. It's just hilarious. he makes a joke of like looking over, like he's trying to like copy off of Nixon's paper, like that. Nixon looks over and sees him and covers the paper up just the way you would in high school. Brezhnev laughs his tail off. Nixon's laughing. They're both signing their agreements. Then, if I remember correctly, Brezhnev is trying to time it so that he finishes his signature right around the same time as Nixon or something, and they're both doing this flourish, and finally Nixon just dots the I on Nixon, and everybody laughs, and they get up and shake hands, and that wasn't staged. That was genuine goodwill. And if it hadn't been for Watergate, the Cold War could have ended in the early 70s, effectively. Could have. I really think they could have. That chemistry, you really have to see it. I was just blown away by it, at how much fun they were having. They were having fun. So then along comes Watergate. Is this the same as taking 30,000 emails at top security, including top secret emails, and storing them on a server in your in a bathroom, apartment bathroom? No, it's nothing close to that. Is it the same thing as taking 10% for the big guys? Nothing close to that, right? What Nixon did was apparently okay a plan to spy on the Democratic National Committee by breaking into the Watergate complex and stealing some records. And none other than, it was either Woodward or Bernstein, one of the two. These are, for those of you not up on ancient history, two reporters for the Washington Post. That's back when the Post was doing actual journalism. I think what Woodward and Bernstein did was important to the health of the country. I just wish they'd do it for the people that are doing all the cheating now. It's why Republicans are, one of the reasons why we're more honest is because we get we get investigated. But before the press became the steno pool for the Democratic Party, they broke this story and ran with it. And either Woodward or Bernstein, these two guys pretty much brought down the President of the United States. One of them said that while we were on the story, we both realized that Nixon could have ended this thing, Watergate, and stayed in office if he had written one sentence on the back of a napkin. And again, Woodward or Bernstein, I don't remember which, said, and that sentence would be something to the effect of, while I did not authorize this break-in, it certainly happened under my watch. I'm the leader of the Republican Party. I take full responsibility for the break-in. People who are involved with this will be punished, and I will make sure and take measures that this will never happen again. But yes, it is on me. It is my responsibility as the President of the United States that these people went and did this thing, and I'm just going to be completely open about it. Because all of the cover-up and the missing tape, 14 minutes of missing time on the tape, Nixon wasn't forced to resign because of the Watergate break-in. He was forced to resign because of the cover-up, he was constitutionally wired, and I mean physical sense. He was wired for paranoia and also for pride. He couldn't just come out and do what anybody with a half a brain would have done, right? Which is use the plausible deniability, but don't avoid the responsibility. That way, people look at you and go, oh, what an honest guy. Because Tricky Dicky, right? He was always known to be like a liar and corrupt. That's what the Democrats painted him as. So if Nixon had just come out and said, yes, there was a break-in, and yes, it was to get files from the Democratic National Committee, and yes, the people that did it were operatives that were working for the Republican Party, and I'm the head of the Republican Party. I did not order that break-in. However, I should have known about it, and I didn't. And since I didn't, I bear responsibility for this because I'm the President of the United States of America. They did it in my name, or at least in the name of the Republican Party, and so therefore I'm responsible for what happened here. And not only will I make sure that this doesn't happen again, but whatever consequences there be, I'm not above the law. I'm a regular citizen like everybody else. That's what happened. And now let's move, not let's get past it, but that's what happened. So what's next? And Woodward and Bernstein both said if he had written that anything along those lines. It would have been over. It would have just been over. But he just kept running and lying and running and lying and running and lying and and it just got to the point where it was just the whole thing was just so rotten and so complex. He just could have done it. And it's always nice to see this. Lady Hawk MB says, just like Kennedy did with the Bay of Pigs. Yes, and the one who really could have put the Cold War away and put it away in 1954, 55, 56. And that is Eisenhower needed to know what the Soviet missile strength was before the Paris summit he was going to have with Khrushchev. He and Khrushchev had not hit it off well, but then Eisenhower had taken Khrushchev to Camp David and did what Nixon and did what Reagan and Gorbachev did 20 some years later. They talked about their kids, they went out for walks and so on. Khrushchev actually started to take a shine to Eisenhower. Now, Eisenhower's in this situation where he's got this thing coming up. We've already done overflights of the Soviet Union and the U-2. The CIA wants one more. The State Department probably doesn't want to do it. Defense does. Eisenhower's thinking, we're going to be talking about missiles. I need to know what they've got. I need to know what this missile gap is. That was the term everybody was bandying about at the time there. And so Eisenhower authorized one more flight of the U-2. One more. And that was Francis Gowrie Power's flight. So that thing was shot down over the Soviet Union. Khrushchev gave Ike, he gave him an out. He gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card. Khrushchev said, well, we was obviously an American spy plane, there's no question about that. The first statement, first of 5 or 6 that Eisenhower White House put out was it was a weather plane or something like that. And Khrushchev comes forward and says, look, it's obviously an American spy plane, and we have the pilot. But I refuse to believe that President Eisenhower authorized this. I refuse to believe that he knew about this kind of thing because I don't think President Eisenhower would have done that kind of thing. It was Khrushchev handing Ike a get-out-of-jail-free card, a face-saving card away. He's writing plausible deniability on a piece of paper and slipping it under the table to Ike. And Ike continued to stonewall, and then he basically lied about it again. And Khrushchev eventually got to the point where he felt like, okay, well, he's just going to screw me over like that? Fine. And the Paris summit fell apart, and we got another Cold War for 20 years. And then Watergate happened, and we got it for another 20 years. So Cold War could have been a 12-year war, 13-year war, instead of a 48-year war. But that's what happened. That's what actually happened. This all comes back to the big question, which was asked of, I don't know, half a century ago, the Russia-China thing. From the beginning of the Soviet Union, the Soviets, I get into this a lot in Empire of Terror, immediately after the revolution, while the Civil War is still going on, Lenin has to find hard cash, foreign capital, because the ruble's worthless. He has to get some hard capital in order to start something he called the Communist International, Comintern. And the Soviets were paying big money to cause agitation and unrest in countries that appeared that they might go communist, and also started to undermine places like the United States, Great Britain, all the rest of them. Because the Soviet system, Leninism, has to maintain control, and it has to maintain control from the center, and that control has to be exercised through terror. That's the way Lenin thought. The thing I kept coming to it again and again and again and again and again. Stalin's one of the greatest monsters in history in terms of the number of people killed, but Lenin wrote the manual and Stalin just followed the instructions. It's all Lenin, all of it. The whole Soviet system is Lenin. So the Chinese didn't much like the idea that, well, we're communist, comrades and brothers. And the Soviet attitude was, That's right. And we'll be sure to let you have a little say when we have the next Comintern meeting before we issue our orders. So that didn't go over well with the communist Chinese. And so now the question is, what does it do today? Right now, there's no question it's a marriage of convenience. There's nothing in the alliance between Russia and China that China gets out of this, other than the chance to chip away at the United States. And it's an odd time for an alliance because China's military is essentially, it's slowly beginning to evolve out of this, but the bulk of it is either Soviet weaponry or copies of Soviet later Russian weaponry. And that weaponry has become a laughingstock. So this alliance on the part of China is not something that they're doing out of strength. Exactly right. Tim Morris says the Chinese get cheap energy. That's it, right? They'll line up with Putin, exchange for cheap energy. They know that keeping the war going is in the interest of the communist Chinese because that just keeps NATO down and all of the the recriminations and splitting up the country and whose fault it is and all the rest of it. It's all a win for China. Russia's position is we need some weapons and we need them now. We need weapons that actually work. Even if there are designed weapons, we need them to work. Tim Moore says a lot of the new Chinese weapons seem to be based on Western systems. Yeah, it takes a little while to spy your way into this kind of technical sophistication. It's much easier to buy your way into it than spy your way into it. But first you buy, then you spy, I guess, for China. And so this alliance is something that they both kind of need, and it doesn't really cost them anything. It's not going to turn public opinion against either one of them. They're both not highly regarded in terms of the rest of the world. And so it will last for as long as the Ukraine war lasts, and when it's over, Russia is in an enormously weaker position than it was before the Ukraine war. And there's two things to say about that. The obvious thing is they've lost an awful lot of men, tanks, airplanes, and so on. So they've taken a lot of losses, but what they've really lost is they've lost the mystique of being a capable superpower. They've lost the mystique of being the alternative to the United States and Western weapons. The big bad Red Army with their T-90 tanks and all of their attack aircraft and all the rest of it, these were things that were inflated by the Russians to look like a pufferfish or like a cat that arches its back. They're trying to look bigger than tougher than they really are. And when Putin decided he wanted to cross this border, and to his amazement, people started fighting back, the first thing that disappeared, because I remember this very clearly, after 2 weeks, the first thing that disappeared was this kind of sense of, well, you got to watch out for those Russian weapons. And near as I can tell from watching the Ukraine war, there is no Russian tactic or even strategy other than just keep throwing people into the grinder until you get what you want. But if you're going to lie to your troops about where they're going, I don't think Xerxes did that. I'm not aware of that ever happening before. So look, this thing will last for a while, and then it will eventually just sort of fade away. They're not going to be friends. They have a mutual border, and somebody here can tell me. The United States-Canada border is the longest undefended border in the world. It might be the longest border in the world, actually. But it's the border with Russia and China is a significant fraction of that Canada-U.S. border. And so they're both ammoing up. Putin's out of ammo. China's going to sell them the stuff that they're replacing. And Russia's going to come out of this thing, even if Russia just essentially just wipes the map clean, if it just say that they did. I just don't see that happening, but just say that they did. They're still enormously weaker than they were when they went in. No one's afraid of their weapons anymore. I heard a NATO military analyst said, now this was an extreme kind of a statement, but I think there was merit to what he was saying. He basically was saying that one of the the largest motivations for Putin to use tactical nuclear weapons, to actually use them, he said, was because it is inconceivable and intolerable that the Russians would face American weapons directly. He said that he suspected, and I think this number feels right to me personally, given the experience we've had in the last 20 years and so on, if the United States were to get involved in a shooting war with Russia, and I don't see any possible way that's going to happen at all, but if they did, he estimated that the casualty ratio would be 1,000 to 1. And that sounds about right to me, actually. About 1,000 to 1. Because we have an Air Force, and we have a Navy, and we have submarines, and we have all these other things. And Russia's struggling against a country that doesn't have any of those things. So I just think that basically it's going to be it's just going to last as long as the Ukraine war lasts. I personally, I personally think it's a mistake to send the M1 over there, and I'm quite confident it's a mistake to send F-16s over to Ukraine. And the reason for this is because Putin's power base has been so badly eroded by this, and he's killed a number of his top-level supporters, and a number of them have been killed in the field, that the reason that I wouldn't have sent the M1 and the M16, I would have sent just about anything else, but not those two, because those two are so iconic. They're iconic American weapons. And Putin needs to show his Russian people that the story he's telling them is true, that this all is about NATO encroachment on Russia, which conveniently leaves out the fact that he invaded Ukraine in 2014 and all the rest of this Russian-Soviet aggression that's happened since the end of World War II. Which is endless. Cameron says we sent a much downgraded version of the M1. I get it. I'm saying I don't even care if they sent an empty version of the M1 with no electronics and no weapons. If they just sent something that looked like the M1, the M1 is so distinctive, and so is the F-16. That I think if the Russian people see these weapons in the hands of the Ukrainians, they're going to believe Putin's line about how this is about defending the motherland rather than just a simple invasion to gain power and territory, which is exactly what it was. Exactly what it was. Dave Big Booty says, what about A-10s? A-10s as well. That would fit in the same category. I wouldn't have sent those. But in any event, the Russia-China alliance does not worry me at all. In fact, neither Russia nor China worries me. I'm concerned about them, but I don't fear them. There's nothing about Russia or China that I fear as an American. I'm afraid of my own government. I almost said the progressive left, but they were just a bunch of losers and weenies. But now, with a weaponized federal government and a weaponized FBI and weaponized tech companies, that really scares me. And the tech companies and the deep state, these are our primary threats. They supersede the southern border, in my opinion, because you can't solve the southern border or any other problems if you don't have free flow of information, and you don't allow law enforcement to do. You not only don't allow law enforcement to do their job, you give law enforcement a direct order not to do their job. So that's what I would go after. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, I actually bears remembering. We were, and CP Tomes pointed this out in the Twitch stream. I'll just close with this because it's important. The guys that are doing the heavy lifting in terms of what success the Russians have had is pretty much Wagner Group, if you like. I prefer Wagner personally. These are private mercenaries, and they're probably, at least now anyway, the best troops that is on the Russian side. But they went to war with the United States of America for about a day, and they did not enjoy the experience. This is widely under-publicized event, but in Syria several years ago, the Russians sent the Wagner group into, I'm pretty sure it was Syria, in significant numbers, hundreds of them, to go in and take some objective or something. And the United States said, no, I don't think so. And so for about 24 hours, these Russian mercenaries weren't facing, villagers with bolt-action rifles. They weren't even facing Ukrainians with javelins. They were facing gunships. They were facing Apaches. They were facing A-10s. And they were destroyed. Hundreds killed. Hundreds of them killed. And the ones that survived said, we don't like the Yankees, but I don't think we want to fight them because we've never run into anything like this before, ever. And that's because they've never run into anything like that before, ever. Because there is nothing like that in the world. There's nothing in the world like the U.S. military. Not even close. Not even close. And it's not just the weapon systems. It's the cooperation. It's the air, sea, land, space battle strategy. The quick response. A private or a sergeant or a corporal can call in an airstrike, and that'll be delivered within 5 minutes because we've just got planes just orbiting on minimal fuel consumption, just waiting to bomb something. No, there's no. That's just, the world has never seen that kind of dominance. And that's why I think this guy said that if we fought Russians toe to toe, that the casualty rates would be about 1,000 to 1. That felt about right to me. And he cannot take that kind of humiliation. So he's making it about NATO aggression and America's invading Russia. That's how the Russians work. They invade a country without provocation, and then they lie about the cause, and then they act the victim. That's the, if you're going to be a one-trick pony, you better know how to do the trick. Tim Morris says they were shocked at the accuracy of U.S. Artillery fire. Yes, they were shocked at the lethality of the Javelin and the MLAWs, which is British, but obviously a Western weapon system. They were shocked by a lot of things. I think the thing that they were shocked most by was the fact that these guys are flying off-the-shelf Best Buy drones. And not only, everybody's seen the footage of them dropping these grenade bombs on individual soldiers, and that's effective in terms of a morale sap. In terms of battlefield casualties, I don't think the drones were really very effective. But what it does show is that there was no place to hide, and that these drones that were so cheap could be anywhere. It wasn't a reconnaissance plane that's over the target for an hour or 40 minutes. These things are up there all the time. And when these drones call in artillery strikes, now we're talking about World War I weapons on target. And artillery in the First War, not in the Second War because things are moving too fast as a general rule, but artillery was, I don't know what the number was, I think killed 60 or 70% of the total combat deaths in World War I were caused by artillery. So yeah, things like that, we can just go in there. And Putin knows what it's like to fight us because it was his adventure in Syria where 400 or 500 of his top Wagner Group mercenaries were just shredded. I don't think we took a casualty. I don't think we took one. Yeah, somebody mentioned the Hercules gunship. Yeah, they don't want to mess with Spooky. That's not something you want to do. I've heard guys who have seen the AC-130 in action. That's for those of you not up on this kind of geeking out on military and aviation stuff. It's a C-130 Hercules transport, 4 turboprop. Been flying since 1950 something. Cannot be improved upon. It's just the perfect airplane for its mission. And it's capable of carrying a lot of weight. It's a transport, so they basically cleared it out. They put all the guns in it, big guns like artillery pieces, and rocket and mortar launchers, and a bunch of miniguns and everything. And they're all aimed out the left side of the fuselage. And this thing just orbits around in a constant left-hand bank. I understand that the pilot on this AC-130's HUD is not in front of him. His heads-up display is off to the left because that's all the C-130 does, is just fly in left-hand circles. And I've heard people who have seen the C-130s at work, and they say that when the C-130 is working over an area, they said it's like the ground is boiling. That's what they said. Just imagine a football field that's just boiling. And I thought, well, that's pretty decent imagery, actually. I can't imagine that, and I can imagine I wouldn't want to be out there much. All right, here we go. Moving on to the next one for a change. Joe Roth. Now, this one I might have already covered. I don't read ahead, but let's see. Hi, Bill. Hope you're well. Thank you, Joe. That's kind of you. Hope you're well, too. Hope everybody out there is well. We all know that the GOP nominee in 2024 for president is either going to be Trump or DeSantis. I think Trump has it unless things change. I agree. Who do you think should be the VP pick on the ticket? Assuming it's Trump, should he pick a running mate that would appeal to the more moderate Rhino base and Blue Dog Democrats? Or do you think it should be a MAGA firebrand? Either way, it would alienate a core group. The MAGA base is needed in order for any Republican to win. However, we need those moderate or independent voters to come to our side. I thought Pence was a Bush-era style, religious right, namby-pamby Rhino Republican that no one really liked. What kind of VP running mate should Trump or DeSantis pick, and why? A MAGA firebrand like Kari Lake, or a more moderate JFK Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard type candidate. Moderates always cave to the leftist mob, so I tend to lean all-out MAGA, ultra-conservative. What do you think? I hadn't given it a great deal of serious thought. I thought Nikki Haley was openly, flaunting her desire for the vice presidency when she said, "Oh, Disney can come to South Carolina. We'll take your 7,000 jobs, and we're not woke, but we're not sanctimonious about it." And I thought, "See you later, Nikki. You're done. You're done with me." But I'll tell you who, and I hadn't thought about this till you asked the question, Joe. If I was Donald Trump, I'd think seriously about Kari Lake. I'd think seriously about her. Very seriously. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I come to believe that that is an unbeatable choice, at least the way the field stands now. The reason that I think she would be really great is that, well, there's Arizona. Obviously, presumably would bring Arizona, but Kari Lake has the ability to do what Donald Trump does, and she has the ability to in some ways, to do it better. Kari is a fighter, and before the election, I watched her deal with the press. And Kari Lake has the one thing that is indispensable in terms of conservative politicians if we want to recover the country, and that is she's not afraid of the press. She's not afraid of them, and she will not play their games. That needs to be a constitutional requirement from this point forward. They're 35 years old or whatever, and natural, and you've got to be able to dish it out to the press. So she's attractive as a woman, obviously. And the more I think about it, the more I think she would be a really excellent vice presidential candidate. You think about Kari Lake in a debate with Kamala Harris. Just ponder that for a while. I thought we were going to see. Oh my God! I'm telling you, my memory's really getting to bother me. I've got his face. Who was Romney's running mate? Who became Speaker of the House? Paul. Come on, that's going to drive me nuts. I can't believe I've just completely spaced out on this. Paul Ryan, thank you. Yeah, Paul Ryan. It's a name I'd completely forgotten. It's a forgettable name, I suppose. But I remember in 2012 thinking that Paul Ryan was going to eat Biden for breakfast because Ryan's a sharp guy. And at the time, for those of you who may remember, 2012, Ryan was the guy who had the plan to get the country economically sound again, not just the budget, just economically sound. He had, seemed to me to be a good economic plan. And he could have destroyed Biden, and he didn't. And he let Biden just laugh the whole way through. So Paul Ryan, whatever happened to him after that, or whatever you think about him after that, Paul Ryan could have disassembled Joe Biden, but he didn't. He had the brain for it. He didn't have the stomach for it. He just didn't have the killer instinct, and Trump does. And I get the feeling Carrie Lake as well. I think Carrie Lake. Well, I've seen Carrie Lake. I've seen her, and Ron DeSantis can do this too. I've seen all three of them, Trump, Lake, and DeSantis, accused of things and have them interrupt the question in the middle of the question and just say that's absolute utter garbage before they finish the sentence. And that's the bare bones minimum. If you don't have that, it's over. If you do have it, it's not a win, but at least you're not finished before you get out of the gate. Gentleman John McCain, who gave us Obamacare for the rest of time, wow, what a maverick. He gave up 6 weeks before the election. He probably gave up before he got the nomination. He was widely heard to say, "I'm not going to be the guy who stands in the way of the first Black American president." And my thought was, "That's fine, John. Welcome to your opinion, but you might want to get out of the way and let people know that you not only don't think you can win this election, that you don't want to. You don't want to win this election." That was insane. And Sarah Palin was pulling him hard the whole way, just like, come on. So this kind of McCain, kind of Romney kind of guy, this argument's been had 1,000 times. I'm not going to get into this argument. There's a flavor of this argument I haven't heard before, and that flavor is simply this. If the rhinos had stood up a little more, then there wouldn't be a division between the rhinos and the MAGA Republicans. If the rhinos had a little more spine, just a little more, then the whole MAGA movement never would have happened. The reason the Republican Party is split, and I think the MAGA half of it is much bigger than the other half, but that MAGA Republican versus traditional Republican thing is there because the traditional Republicans caved so many times and just walked away from potential wins, And I think the crown jewel of this, too much respect for people who don't deserve it, was when Romney had Obama on the ropes in foreign policy and Candy Crowley inserted herself into the argument, and Romney just kind of muttered something, and anybody with a spine would have said, "Hey, you're not running for president. You're not running for president. You're a person with a microphone. No one's elected you. You don't get to be in this argument. You get to ask the questions and we answer them. Shut up until I'm finished." Now, Obama, Mr. Obama, and he just should have. And if he'd done that, people would have cheered him to the rafters. But he just didn't. He just didn't have it. Didn't have it. I saw Romney at a fundraiser in California, I don't know, a month before the election, in the San Francisco area, and he spoke to, these are wealthy Republicans, so the room full of really wealthy Republicans and me. And he basically said, "Look, don't worry, whatever money we raise here tonight, don't worry, we're not going to spend it on California because we don't have a chance to win California." Now, on some level, you can say that's realpolitik and that's correct. But from a philosophical angle, I just thought that was suicide. I just thought, what do you mean we can't win California? I'm enough of a realist to know how the deck is stacked against us in California. I live here. But that's not my point. My point is that if Romney had gone, Romney should have run the campaign the way that anybody who wants to win would. And if it were me running for president, I would say, not only are we going to win 50 states, we're going to get 100% of the vote. I'm going for 100% of the vote. That's my objective. 100% of the vote. I want to get everybody. I at least want to make, I know I'm not going to get everybody, but I want to get everybody. I'm going to make the case to every single person out there, every single group. I'm going to make the best case for this, and I'm going to show them why it's in their interest to change this system. And he just walked in, with like, well, we've already lost these states, because their pollsters tell them this. But you lose this. I mean, most of these elections are 53-47. That's a fairly big win. That's why this Florida thing was just so earth-shaking, astonishing. Nobody wins by 30 points. You usually win by 3 points, if that. And he just, and he had that 47% of the country's They're never going to vote for us because they're on welfare. That was his basket of deplorables moment, and they were right to go after him on that because the answer to the problem is not to say screw 47% of the country. The answer to the problem is to make the case to the 47% of the country that was on federal assistance. I think that's what he was making the criteria on. The way to win the election and save the country is to say, all right, now, the 47% of you that are currently on government assistance, let me tell you why I'm going to be better for you than continuing down this road. I would have gone for all of them. I would have gone for all of them. I wouldn't have left a vote on the table, not one. And that attitude is what makes the difference between winners and losers. Reagan had that attitude. I never saw Reagan. I've seen Reagan angry, but I never saw Reagan. I don't think I ever saw Reagan mean. I saw him angry, but Reagan, his sense of humor was just so unbelievably disarming, and his optimism. I mean, that's how I would have gone at it. And turns out he only won 49 out of 50 states, right? Both times? No, I don't think he did that in 76. He did it, in 80, but in 84 he ran 49 out of 50 states. Quibo 2 says we're in the minority. Well, we may be in the minority of the population, but we're not in the minority of voters if our voters show up and theirs don't. And in order for that to happen, you have to have a case for your own people, and you have to have a case for the other side to make it palatable enough for them to not go vote that day. This is not vote suppression. It's not a strategy of voter suppression. It's just whoever shows up wins. And especially if you happen to own the Secretary of State of that particular state and the Attorney General. Yep. Okay, here we go. New question. This is a super chat from Deef. Bill, it's 1095 AD. Oh boy, that was a rough year. I remember that so well. And Pope Urban II has just given the Council of Claremont calling Christians to take up the cross and liberate the Holy Land. Do you join the First Crusade or not? I'll give you my knee jerk. You just hit me in the knee with a rubber hammer answer, and the answer is yes. Yes. That's not my considered opinion, and I'm not sure that would be my final decision. But when the question formed itself in my mind, would I do it? I'd say yes. I absolutely would do it. Absolutely. The Holy Land, Palestine, now is a real, let's just say Jerusalem. Jerusalem was not always a Muslim town. Actually, I read a book on the history of Jerusalem. It was very good. It's amazing the number of people that have run, different kinds of people that have run Jerusalem. But if I'm a European king, if I'm in 1095 AD, I'm very likely to really believe my religion. Imagine that, huh? Believe in it and take it seriously. And if somebody said these infidels have come in and destroyed the cross all over the land where the cross actually was erected, and we better do something about it, I'd say, I'm in. Absolutely. Let's go. 100%. And you got to factor in too, now it's still pretty early at that point, 1095, but the Muslims are expanding. They're not at their maximum. I don't want to say that happened around 1400 or something when they finally kicked them out of Spain. But yeah, I would have done it. And a lot of people say it was kind of like the perception of the Vietnam War, unwinnable. The Vietnam War wasn't unwinnable because we won it. And we won it with both hands tied behind our back. And the Crusades took Jerusalem, didn't they? Maybe they didn't. They got, I actually don't remember. I know they got that giant stronghold where the Hospitallers were, but they could have, right? And the reason that they didn't succeed was because the Christians were not only fighting each other, but they were stealing from each other. They were looting each other. They were just constantly, they got the Venetians ripped them off, really took them for a ride. And if they had been, the problem was that since it was essentially what we would call a multinational coalition, this took place in an authoritarian age where there is the king. This is my king, and I fight for my king. Okay, well, now my king has told me to go here, and so is the French king, and so is the Spanish king, or whoever was there. And now I've got these other soldiers on either side of me, and they're fighting for their king. I'm fighting for my king. We're both going in the same direction, but we're not the same army. And that was, I think, the fatal flaw of the Crusades. But people, the left always does this. They always invert who's the aggressor. You know, they try to make the Cold War about the U.S. just doing nothing but going to other lands for quest for oil, and it's just the Cold War was nothing but responding to Soviet aggression. That's personally the same bucket I chucked the Ukraine situation into. The Crusaders were not going as invaders to the Holy Land. They were going to restore the religion that was there before the Muslims invaded. Now, I don't buy this whole kind of, the land, the only two people who have claims on a land are the first people there and the people who are there now. They're the only ones who have any legitimate claim to the land. And the people who started on the land aren't here anymore. So it's just the way it goes. I did a segment on, it was in the What We Believe series. And I think I took Lubbock, Texas. And this was, when the Mexican Aztlan movement, the whole kind of Mexicans living in America wanting the territories that America got after the Mexican-American War returned to Mexico. This was really hot item. And so, this is our land. They're saying Texas is our land. It's all our land. I said, okay. So if, Kingdom of Jerusalem, 1099 to 1187. Well, that's a long time, man. Anyway, so I said, okay, so you want to be fair if you got a claim to the land, then the U.S. has to give Texas back to Mexico. But it can't give Texas back to Mexico first. First, it has to go to the Confederacy because the Confederacy had Texas before we did. So we have to return Texas to the Confederacy. Then the Confederacy has to return Texas, to the Republic of Texas. And then the Republic of Texas has to turn it over to Mexico. And then the Mexicans have to turn it over to the Spanish, and the Spanish have to turn it over to the French, and then the French have to hand it back to the Spanish, and then they have to hand it to either the Apaches or the Comanches. I followed this thing all the way back to 26,000 BC, prehistory, first people across the land bridge kind of thing. And I think there were 11 or 12 different ownership things. So it's very convenient for people to say, well, this is our land. It's like, it used to be our land. Well, it's not anymore. And if you're saying you stole it from us, well, we want it in a war. And you want it in a war too. So you don't get to sit on that high horse. Now, you might have a compelling argument for it, but nevertheless, this business of you took it from us is not a morally decisive argument. Yeah, we won a battle, a number of battles. Actually, we just sent our cadets in and they conquered your entire country. We were the heart of your capital, but who's counting? And that's what Mexico did when they took it from, when Mexico declared its independence from Spain. That's what the Spanish did to the Aztecs, and back it goes. Monk in Training for a super chat here, real quick. Marines and one of my with the ones who dropped some mortars on Wagner Group. Oh, killed hundreds, and Putin just slinked away like the paper tiger he is. Monk in Training there, if I understand that correctly, I don't know if you were a part of that. I know that the Marines were a part of that, and any Marine Corps, Pacific War is going to cover the Marine Corps in glory forever, and every time since then too, including Fallujah. All right, trying to catch up with these chats here. How we doing? Yeah, we're all right. Okay, let's see what we got next. Good. Roadrunner with a question. OMG, O'Keefe Media Group. James O'Keefe is now being sued by his old Project Veritas. The question, what do you think PB is trying to accomplish with this lawsuit? Getting back some of the Project Veritas funds that they felt James misspent? Punishment for being a meanie boss? Embarrassing him negotiating his effectiveness before 2024? Sorry, negating his effectiveness before 2024? What advice would you give him, being the more experienced and much older statesman of the two of you? Well, I would tell that young whippersnapper to do exactly what he's doing. I don't know James O'Keefe well, but I do consider him a friend. We've been to, needless to say, several events together and had a significant amount of time to talk when we weren't in these events. And I told him at the beginning of this, once did the acorn thing, but once it was clear that he was going to keep doing this kind of thing, I walked up to him, I said, as far as I'm concerned, you're the most important piece on the board. And I meant it, and I still mean it. So when O'Keefe was forced out by the board of Project Veritas, I know some donors, big donors for Project Veritas. I know them relatively well. Big donors, and these men were so proud of what James O'Keefe was accomplishing. They would just send out these emails. Oh, looks like you got another one. Looks like you got another one. Best dollars I ever spent. Blah blah blah. And they're absolutely right. 100% right. 100%. And the idea that I was just going to say, how could anybody on the Project Veritas board realize that this was nothing other than the complete dissolution of what's there, and that O'Keefe is just going to pack his bag, he's going to move across the street, and he's going to set up shop, he's going to be more successful. It's exactly what Tucker Carlson did. How stupid do you have to be to think that you can run Project Veritas without James O'Keefe? And how stupid do you have to be to think you can keep Fox News at the top of the charts when you fired Tucker Carlson, or reach a mutual understanding, whatever the case may be? Tucker Carlson is the draw. James O'Keefe is Project Veritas. Project Veritas without James O'Keefe was like Apple without Steve Jobs, when they kicked him out of his own company. And they started making beige boxes that looked exactly like PCs, behaved like PCs, just cost 3 times as much as a PC. I've heard that Apple was within 6 months of bankruptcy when they brought Steve Jobs back, and first thing Jobs did was create the iMac, the blue plastic clear one. Bing! Breitbart as well. Sad Wings Raging says with a little tear emoji, and I agree about the tear emoji. And by the way, Emery Calamy, I think it's Calamy, with a super chat says Texas was only part of Mexico for 13 years, California for 26 years. Interesting. So, what is their objective? Well, I was going to say they might look. My first instinct on this, when I heard this news, my first instinct was that this is sabotage, because O'Keefe got Pfizer on camera saying, yeah, we never tested the vaccine. Remember that? That was what, 3-4 days before this whole thing happened, where they got the guy who was head of, it was like one of their marketing guys or something, hidden camera, this black guy and black gay man, and they sent this guy in to date him a couple times and stuff, and then he's saying on camera, we did it. And for the first time and only time I've ever seen this in my entire long life, ever have I seen this, when it was revealed that there was footage of him, hidden camera footage, he actually got violent and started climbing over tables to get the camera. I've never seen that before, ever. I've seen people storm out. I've seen people look down, be defeated. I've seen people claim it didn't happen. I've never seen somebody who was so terrified that they went and tried to destroy the camera. And Pfizer is Pfizer. That's who he got. He didn't get Acorn. He didn't get, he didn't get the LA County Department of Water and Power. He got Pfizer to admit that their vaccine was untested and that they knew it and that it has a lot of problems. That's a society-changing piece of video. And sure enough, 3 or 4 days after that was released, then all of a sudden society changed, at least for James O'Keefe, right? So I think that there was pressure put on a number of board members, and I mean big pressure, on the board. I don't know which members of the board, but I mean like the kind of pressure that our insect overlords can apply. And there are people that are immune to that kind of pressure. I'm immune to it. I'd like to try it. Maybe they could send me a couple $1 billion and I could see if I could return most of it. But generally, I won't violate my principles for money. Neither would James O'Keefe. He wouldn't. He just walked out of there, and the second he walked out of there, the instant I heard the news, I texted him and I said, "Buddy, wherever you go, everybody, including the money, is going to follow you, and you're going to be back in business in a week. Good luck, and I think this is going to, in the long run, be good for you. Thanks, man." It's clear with all of these guys. And Sad Wings Raging says the same thing with Tucker and his January 6th report. Funny how when you touch that raw nerve, how the big machine starts to rattle. I never believed in big machine before, but I do now because of the evidence, because of the overwhelming weight of evidence. But what they did was they applied pressure to the cowards who are on board of directors and run corporations, but they can't apply pressure to Tucker Carlson or James O'Keefe, no matter what you think of them, and I hold them both in high regard. The big guys can't put pressure on them because they're immune to them. They don't care about the money, and they don't even care about death threats. James O'Keefe, the only thing I regret about this was I just thought Project Veritas was a great name. Veritas means the truth, obviously. And so when I heard that they're suing him, I asked myself, well, why are you going to make whatever shreds of support you have left? Why are you going to, lose those people too? And then I realized for the same reason that Bud Light ran a commercial with Dylan Mulvaney, which I believe is at $26 billion now. I saw a video, I think it was on Odin's Men. Dylan is vacationing in Bora Bora? Tora Bora? I can't remember which one's a tropical paradise and which one's a Afghani wasteland. Tora Bora. And it said, oh, well, I spent the last 2 months kind of depressed and all the rest of the stuff, but I'm back on my game now, and did his little Dylan thing. And I'm thinking, you, sir, are the $26 billion man. It's not fun to realize that you're unpopular. It's not nice it's not a good feeling when you realize that people don't like you, especially a lot of people. But when you think about it, and he must have thought about, I don't know if he must have thought about it. Anybody who's self-aware would think about it. It's got to be quite a feeling, really, to come to realize that you are so widely despised that a company's going to lose $26,000 million. $26,000 million of value because they went with me as their spokesman. And not only the financial value, but an iconic American brand has been destroyed, and I don't see any way it's coming back. I don't think I'm that unpopular, frankly, and I don't think I can't think of a person that is that universal, that had that kind of effect. Brew Daddy says he's curious what Mulvaney got paid for the commercial. My understanding was it was in the neighborhood of $100,000 or $200,000. It wasn't like some gigantic long-term deal. It was a one-off commercial for was it March Madness or something? I think there's some kind of a game going on. I think it involves a ball of some kind. I don't know anything about that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. In any event, it must have been a rough couple months for Dylan. And I remember clearly thinking, speaking of Dylan, I had an opinion about Dylan Mulvaney. And then I saw the clip of him from The Price is Right several years before he became trans. And I have never in my life, this is the third time I've said this in this show, but I mean it every time. I have never in my life seen anybody who was that much of an attention whore as Dylan Mulvaney. I've never seen anybody who struck me as like, this is the last helicopter out of Saigon kind of level of desperation to get attention that Dylan Mulvaney did on The Price is Right. That was the most appalling, unbelievable, crass, low, vulgar, cynical, narcissistic, pointless orgy of need that I've ever seen. And if you haven't seen it, it really is amazing. He runs up and down, falls on the floor, rolls around. It's like he's was it Drew Carey who was the host then? I don't know if it was or not, but it's like he's just running around. Oh, look at me, look at me, look at me. Okay. So I remember when this Bud White thing happened and it looked like it was going to stick. I remember thinking, well, Dylan, you wanted to be famous. Now you are. Now you're famous. Now you're world famous. You're well known to the entire country. You're probably the most unpopular person in America right now, and maybe the world. Got to be careful what you wish for. Anyway, I just said something bad about Dylan Mulvaney, so my time on YouTube is probably numbered in the hours, and I just don't care anymore. And I've never cared. Okay, well, we got to do this one because Bob Knife is looking at me with an NRA hat, some Boss sunglasses, and an attitude like in his avatar icon here thing. It's like, I don't want to piss off Bob Knife, especially a guy named Bob Knife. Fifth time. Bob, I'm all yours, and I apologize sincerely. I'm not making fun of you. I'm sorry it took me 5 times to get to this. A few weeks ago, you gave an eloquent statement about the general welfare, and I agree with you. However, Article 1, Section 8, not the preamble, unfortunately says to lay and collect taxes, duties, imports, and excises, to pay the debts, and to provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. I have a feeling I answered this last time, but maybe that's just the conversation I have with the voices in my head. Now, I agree the term provide for the general welfare has been bastardized by Democrats, and provide for had a different meaning to the Founding Fathers, but nonetheless, it does state provide for. I'd love to hear how you would argue what the founders meant by that. And when I discussed this before, I don't know if it was on Stratosphere Lounge, I just don't remember, but I said, I'm not going to take issue with the words provide. The founders knew what they were doing. The founders got everything. I've yet to find an error that they've made. I found plenty of things go wrong where we didn't obey the law, or we decided to put a period where a comma is. I see that all the time. But I've never seen them make a mistake about anything. The system is so perfectly designed that it's just one of the strongest arguments for the existence of a God. Frankly, it is just amazingly, astonishingly, profoundly true. So I'm not saying that the founders were talking about the dole, because I don't think that the issue is with the word provide. I think the issue is with the general welfare. I think that's where I would make the argument. It says provide for the general welfare. Okay, well, if it says so in the Constitution, then it's in the Constitution. But if you take money from me and giving it to somebody else, you're not providing for the general welfare. You're providing for the specific welfare. You're disadvantaging some Americans in order to raise and enrich other Americans. That's not the general welfare. That's the precise opposite of the general welfare. Anything that is for the general welfare benefits all of us equally. So the idea of taking money from one person and giving them to somebody else is not the general welfare. It's antithesis of the general welfare. General welfare would be something along the lines of the air traffic control system, right? I mean, I'm not saying the founders had that specifically in mind, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. That's a good example of something that the government needs to spend on the general welfare. It's in the interest of all Americans. Even if you're not flying, it's in your interest to not have airplanes come falling out of the sky. So, provide for the general welfare, yes. That means that you can spend money on things that we all get equally, that we all benefit equally, but and Colonel Angus has a great point, general welfare would be the Louisiana Purchase. Absolutely. And so would Seward's Folly in Alaska. That would be for the general welfare. But anyway, hang on. Alpha Cat don't have time to watch now, but stopping to say hi. Looking forward to watching later. Well, thank you, Alpha Cat. It's good to see you. It's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Hope to see you come back next Thursday. So that's general. That's where I would shoot it down, and I think you're on solid constitutional grounds. And when I say solid constitutional grounds, you're on solid constitutional grounds because you're on solid linguistic grounds. That's the genius of. Oh, there's Bob. He looks so much friendlier in the chat section. In the members section, he looks like he's gonna shiv me in the back, and I wouldn't blame him either after 5 times. It's just it is what it is, It is what it is, and they know it. So this is why they use their rhetorical intelligence to do things like, "We'll name it welfare because it's in the Constitution." So, okay. You could have named it general welfare, then you'd be right, but then you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing with welfare, would you? So that's kind of a problem. Anyway, great question. Thank you for that, Bob. Let's see what we got here. Hey, hold on. We're looking at 2 questions left, and we will have run the table at just about the right time. Hold on. Technically, we're actually looking at 1 question because I'm going to try and impose a one per customer kind of rule here, but since it's not one of the usual suspects, I'll take these final 2. It's Joe Roth responding to Bob's question, and as usual, it's extremely cogent and well-written argument, predicated on a deep understanding of the structure of this country, just like what I'd expect from people who hang around here. Which you make me look really good, make me look better than I am. Actually, I'm very grateful for that. Okay, so the final question then goes to Marusha Dark, whose avatar appears to be an individual sitting in a yellow chair, but from me with my failing eyesight, always looks exactly like Big Bird looking right at the camera. Bill, by now I'm sure you've probably heard the news of major forest fires raging across Quebec. It got so bad the other day that the smog even reached here in New Jersey, and pretty much the entirety of New England was issued air quality warnings, with people being told to stay indoors. Toughen up, snowflakes. You should get used to breathing smoke. We go to work we walk through forest fires to go to work out here. On Discord, I sent you a link of a video of a live satellite feed showing multiple fires across the province, all igniting at once, which seems highly unlikely. It does, doesn't it? I guess with all the math euthanasia, the Canadian government needed someplace to burn the bodies. Good Lord. This is the thing about dark humor. It's like, it just takes the edge off of something that is so true that if you played it straight, you just couldn't get out of your mouth. All joking aside, though, to my eyes, based on the video, it does seem like ecoterrorism and organized arson, assuming the video is real. Conspiracy hypotheses abound about it, but we're not sure of the details yet about what caused the fire. Wouldn't surprise me if after the threat of COVID passed, the World Economic Forum-based backed Canadian government, are looking for the next reason to scare people about climate change and getting used to staying indoors. Do you have any thoughts on this? Yes. I've always been careful about this, and I'm going to be careful about it now. This show's not widely watched. I don't think it's going to be. It's not like it's a security leak or anything. It's just something that I don't like talking about things that are beneficial to people who can harm the country. Real quick, Cody Fett for $5 says, everyone thought that Alaska was a great purchase at the time. Not sure where the Seward's Folly line got started. I've heard nothing but people saying it was a catastrophe, but that's just what I'm reading. So if there's another side to it, Cody, that's great. Anyway, back to the fires. When we were in the post-911 days and we were wondering where the next attack was coming from, and we were checking underneath. When I was working in a movie studio at the time, and to get on the lot, we had to have the mirror underneath the car checking for explosives and opening the trunks checking for explosives. And I remember one of the Onion articles or something was talking about what the the Duluth County Public Library was doing to harden itself against terrorist attacks, something like that. But it occurred to me that the easiest and simplest way to do massive amounts of damage would be to take 5 people with a Bic lighter into the Hollywood Hills in the end of summer. And that's all it would take. These California fires occasionally seem to be, sometimes they're lightning strikes, sometimes they're a fire that maybe shouldn't have been there, got out of control. Certainly some of them are deliberate arson, but they're deliberate arson by one person who's lighting a fire in one place, and that fire could extend to hundreds, thousands of acres and kill many people like it did several years ago. Just burn out an entire town here. But if you think about it, not only would it be a very small number of people, a trip to 7-Eleven would get you armed. And furthermore, it's not like you're driving around with a bomb in your car, right? If you're not caught red-handed doing it, then you just walk away, So, like I said, I don't like to really harp on these kind of things, but to answer your question about whether it was intentional or not, terror arson would destroy Southern California. And honestly, I really believe I could, just by myself, meaning any one person, could conceivably, if you pick your time right, you know what you're doing, you wait for the winds in the right direction, conceivably one person, in a Toyota in one night could, for all intents and purposes, make Southern California uninhabitable. And you got to figure too that if there are wildfires in Quebec, I certainly have my sympathy. I've seen these things here; they're horrific. But it's considerably wetter up there than it is down here, and this entire county is. And we had a very, very wet year. We had such a wet summer. Such a wet winter that they declared like an emergency and extension on your taxes and all the rest of this stuff because it rained. But for California, it rained a lot. Florida guy, it's like, well, did I miss something? But by California standards, it was a real rain. And that helped us with our reservoir problems, and also can be a problem because these tumbleweeds and sagebrushes and all the things that are out there, the wild weeds that are on the hillsides everywhere, they are biologically wired to grow like crazy when there's water. They're weeds, basically. So every year in Southern California, we get a week of rain, pretty much a week it seems, and then that's pretty much it. And then shortly after that, you can drive through California, especially if you go out on the 101 from Los Angeles towards Santa Barbara. And for maybe 3 weeks out of the year, you can tell yourself you're in Ireland. It is just emerald green everywhere. It's just green, the greenest green I've ever seen. It's all these plants just doing everything they have to do for the year. Now, the problem with a wet winter is that while it helps with the reservoirs, it means that the amount of flammable undergrowth has grown explosively. Right now, it's not dry, but it will be. And that is the downside of wet winters. Now, if we had a government, a federal government or a state government, any sense of adults in charge, if there were adults in control, if I was the governor of Florida, if I was the governor of California, rather, then while things were still wet, while it was still raining, I'd get real experts in there, and I would get lots of different experts. I'd go to the wisdom of the crowds. I'd get people from every walk of life. I'd get farmers. I'd get long-term residents, but I would certainly get firefighting experts and all the rest of them. I get meteorologists, and before it rained that year, I would sit down with them, and I would take a look at the areas that are at the biggest risk for wildfire, and I would say, what can we do while it's raining to firewall these things. What if we have limited resources and limited time? So if we're going to bulldoze a couple of lines, right? If we're just going to go out there with bulldozers, I'm going to mobilize every bulldozer I get my hands on as governor. What would we have to do, in what order, to put circuit breakers into this wildfire thing? And that's what a government would do. Yeah. AKA Woody Fool says, manage the forest heresy. Not even a forest, it's just weeds. Weeds. Manage it? Yes, absolutely. And I do it while it's raining, because you could it is the perfect fuel. It is very, very, very dry. And unlike a tree trunk, which really needs a lot of heat to get going, it's hard to burn a log. Everybody's ever had a fireplace. You know that you put a log in there, and if you don't already have a fire going, it takes a little bit of tinder to get the log a rolling. If the log is already, if the fire is already burning, then the log will go pretty fast. But it takes a while, right? And that same thing applies to wildfires. It takes a significant duration of fire, not just extent, but duration to catch big trees on fire. But these are literally tumbleweeds from the movies. They are the perfect fuel. They're nothing but fuel surrounded by air. You couldn't design a more flammable thing than these things. So once that thing starts, man, it goes. And fire will move in two directions. Fire will move downwind and fire will move uphill. That's all it does. Fire doesn't go into the wind and fire doesn't go downhill. It doesn't. So I would look at the map and I'd have geologists, I'd have everybody, and I'd say, all right, what is the most likely place to see a fire, and what would be the most catastrophic outcome, and what would we have to do to prevent that? Let's get out there and start stripping the hillside. How wide does this strip have to be? I think it'd have to be pretty wide, to be honest with you, because my point about that being so flammable is that if you're dealing with a large forest, you could put a couple hundred yards just clear the ground for a couple hundred yards. I'd probably do it. But with these fires and with the winds, it only takes a couple of embers to just light the whole county up, right? Just light it up. So I don't know if you see an authentic picture, Marusha, of fire starting in a line at the same time, somebody's at work. And it doesn't have to be our insect overlords, but it could be. Again, I don't like talking about this much. It's not like this is widely. I certainly wouldn't say this if I was on the air, like on TV or anything. But the amount of damage that could be done by coordinated, organized arson is unbelievable. And I'm really quite surprised that it hasn't happened yet. All right. Well, Douglas, I'm sorry, is it Gaxiola? Sorry, Douglas, I don't mean to butcher your name. I hate it when people do that to me. Hopefully it's Douglas Gaxiola. You forgot the 3 years of required environmental impact assessments and then 12 years of fighting lawsuits from all of the eco-Nazis. Yes, I did. I did forget that. Well, I'm assuming that I was elected dictator. And the first thing I would do is elected dictator is I'd get rid of all the bureaucracy. And the second thing I'd do would be I would limit my term. Let's see. I think that's about it. I was the first student on first hang up. Yeah, Deef with his Canadian flag avatar says, I was first aid on a forest fire at Pelican Lake in British Columbia in 2010, and I remember the wind picking up and watching a wall of fire consume row after row of trees closing in on us before the wind shifted. We used to see these in Florida too, believe it or not. There were Everglades fires every now and then, and those things lit up too. Looking back on it, I don't know how the Everglades could have burned because the Everglades is nothing but water, but nevertheless it did. And so every year when there's forest fires out here, big fire, wildfires, there's always footage of somebody, driving down a trail or something, and they just keep going, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And those are really scary and unnerving. However, the only thing I saw um, is that really freaked me out was didn't freak me out. It just impressed me. I want to say 3, 4 years ago, the 405 freeway burned, and there is video footage taken where you're coming down the hill from the valley down into Brentwood, and it's like descending into hell. I mean, the whole thing is just walls and walls of flame, and it goes all the way around, and you're just driving down this thing, and the fire's just getting deeper and deeper and wider, and that's an experience. All right. Douglas again says, Bill, are you still interested in background on the info on the Naval Reactors program? Very much. I sent you an email. Shirley said she would forward it to you. I think she did, Douglas. I hate to ask you to do this. If you could do it again, would you just put reactors in the title line and send it to info and ask Shelley to send it to me again? Just because I really do want to see it, and it'd be probably faster and easier than me searching for it. And my apologies for missing it earlier, because I'm genuinely interested in that stuff, especially now with Major Mace Mattingly and all the rest of it. All right, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going home, and well, I'm not going home yet, but I'm going to start packing my bags. Got the questions done. That's the main thing. So this show is made possible by the members of BillWhittle.com, who continue to support this organization through thick and thin, and for whom we are eternally grateful. And I mean that sincerely. Think about it every day. There's not a day that goes by when I don't think about the people that part with $10 a month to allow me to continue doing this, and Steve and Scott and Zoe and all the rest of them. Very grateful on a daily basis, and very grateful and very appreciative of the life I've been able to lead, thanks to the contributions of those of you out there. Most of you are Stratosphere Lounge guys. So again, thank you very much for that, and on behalf of my wife as well as Stephen, Scott, and Shelley, and Mark, our editor, and Zoe, and the uncounted thousands that I have down in the HR department. Thanks for all of that. So we'll see you Monday night. I'm making progress on the Major Mace Mattingly stuff, and until then, I guess that'll do it. So I guess it's time to just go ahead, and just kind of push the button, Frank.